So now we'll look at aliases. We just looked at schemas and schema names and referring to tables across schemas. Now what we do is we look at a thing called an alias, which essentially allows you to rename a table or a data source in a query. So it's saying select optional alias dot column, optional alias from table space alias. That's the syntax, and it's very simple. You've got two columns, both coming from the ACT table here, and all we're doing is selecting those two columns. Now, given that we've referred to the table with an alias, you might think that you can't do this, but actually in this case you can. What happens with the aliases is that if you don't refer to a column with an alias and you put another table in the query, such as in a join, which we will look at later on in this particular course, if there's two fields with the same name on different tables, it can get confused. In other words, if you say ACT and then ACT ID from the other table, it's not going to know which one to pick it from. So it's bad programming practice to leave aliases out when you have them defined down there. Just don't do it. The other thing that you can do is, as we've already seen, we'll look at these various examples quickly. You can describe the alias and all the columns for that alias, as in that table, using an asterisk. So we can run that query, that works. We can also refer to one specific column. We can refer to all columns without referring to the alias because we're only pulling from a single table. Again, we'll look at joins later on. And again, this is the same thing without the alias, but because there's only one table, there's no confusion as to where the name column comes from. So now let's go back to our script again. And once again, we can actually use a pseudo alias, which assumes the name of the table. We don't have to use it, but we can use it if we want to, and it also implies that we can do this as well. We don't need to show these examples, just type them in. So ACT name can refer to ACT, and then you can also have ACT with the same table name, and the same would apply here. You can't obviously do something like this, where if you say select ACT.name from ACT A, and we'll run this one just to show you. It's not going to do that because it doesn't know where ACT.name is, because it's been defined as ACT. Similarly, if we do this, we use that, it's not going to find it. It doesn't know where the object or alias A is. And the same would apply if we left the alias out as well. Going back into the manuals, we can find the syntax for the alias in the manuals by going to the select clause, clicking on the query block, going to the select list, follow the arrow in here, go up this line here. It's saying you can say select asterisk, go out from table. You can also say select optionally T alias, as in a table alias, dot asterisk. So A dot everything from a table. You can also go in here and go down this way and go down here and say select expression, where expression can also be alias dot column name. And obviously we have as C alias, which is an alias that you're using to rename a column inside a select statement, so you can refer to it later on in the query, such as in a subquery or a subquery factoring clause, and so on and so forth, where you can actually refer to the name of the column in the query, as opposed to just renaming the header in SQL+. So looking at aliases and naming of columns, as in the C alias, I promised I would actually go into this in more detail. Very briefly, the as keyword is optional. The alias effectively renames the select list item for the duration of the query. The alias can be used in the order by clause, but not any other clauses in the query. So, You can also use it as a column rename and pass it up to a calling query when you're running a subquery, and then you can use the name of the column that you renamed it to. But that's different and a future course. I want to show you a very simple example. This is just looking at temp spaces, but I'm going to change it to make it a little bit more descriptive. This particular table or view, I have to be connected to system. So here I can run this query, and it gives me all the data files in my database, all data files with table space name. So here I have a column rename. So let's go to here and order by max GB. It doesn't like that, so I'll go and put as in here to rename the column. Hit return for the order by clause. And it still doesn't give me a response, so we're going to do this. It's case sensitive. In other words, if I did, let me try something, put it in quotes, what's the exact name? As you can see, you can use the C alias in the order by clause, and that's enough about aliases.